Daytona. I'll bring you along for the ride.
Hey, so last week I talked to you a little bit about my trip to Daytona. This week we are bringing you the trip to Daytona, but in that I told you that I was going to review 4 different navigating apps, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, with day 1 of my trip, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the planning and how I use Google Maps to do my planning, and then how I converted it into the mapping apps that I used on my trip. So enjoy.
Hey, gas stop 1 and bike's running well, and we're heading out. We're at Humboldt and heading on the way.
So if you remember and saw from last week's video, the map that I have going is a very straight. A lot of the route was extremely straight. Sometimes I was going straight on 4-lane roads that weren't major. Sometimes it was 4-lane roads that were major, but they weren't the interstate. I stayed off of the interstate, and sometimes I went through 2-lane roads on the outskirts. Mostly it was the outskirts of Kansas City when I was in that area. But the big thing is, you'll see here the mapping app that I used for all this was the Kalimoto app. And I'll zoom in here and let you see the Kalimoto app. It gives me my direction, gives me a big thing showing me where I need to turn next, and also shows me my time and how long I'm going next. Hey, and so I use an Android phone for all my mapping. So this is going to be based on an Android-based system. I have used Google Maps a lot for traveling, but in traveling on the motorcycle, I didn't want to take the fastest route that Google Maps always shows you. So in doing so, I mapped out my trip with the My Maps function of Google Maps, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then also I converted over and used, on the way down, I used an app called Kalimoto, and I used the Harley Davidson app for my mapping. And so we'll go over those. I'll tell you what I liked about them and show you how I converted my Maps app into those, and also why I wasn't able to use Google My Maps and how it is different than Google Maps for navigating.
So, if you didn't know, in Maps you have the ability to make your own maps. As you know, for example, if you're typing in some place that you want to travel to, you of course got directions, and you can choose your directions of where do you go just by doing that. But if you go up here to the menu and you go to your places, and then you go over here to maps, you can actually create maps. So down at the bottom you can say create maps, but for now I'm going to show you the one that we're talking about with my trip to Daytona Beach. And I'm going to initially show you day 1. And so one way to do that, and the way you create maps, is you go and click on open in maps. So I've chosen this, and I can go open in maps, and then it brings me up and shows me my whole entire map. But the portion we want to talk about right now is day 1, and I'm going to zoom into that a little bit. And the way you do this, if I'm going to add another level, so if I go up here and I say add directions, so when you do that, it gives you the ability to type in areas. So let's say we're just going to go here, to destination Daytona. And then it gives you that map to that area. And then if you didn't want to take these particular routes, see, because it chose the fastest way possible. If I wanted to go down here to Greenville, the way I was going through doing these is I would, for example, pick a gas station in the town where I'm going to go. I'm not going to try and go through and try and find the gas stations. Usually I would go in regular maps, find a gas station, and then pull. Okay, so here's a gas station. So I'm going to pull this app. I selected it, hit Control C, and then I'm going to add it here. And there, I added it, and then I'm going to move it up to point 2 so that then it changed the way my map goes. And if I wanted to continue and not be on major roads, so this is how I created my map, is I chose not to be on major roads like the interstate. I chose to do back roads. So once we go to Greenville there, then let's come over here and let's just choose another area like this and pull that and put it in here, and then move that up, and see how it changes the way our direction of our map goes. So I'm going to delete this out, delete that layer, and I'm going to go back up here and talk about my initial map. So initially I chose my directions of where I wanted to go and made so I didn't go the interstate.
And then I would pick points that were approximately 150 miles distanced so that I knew where my regassing was. And then I also picked some other ones so it actually would go down the route that I wanted it to go rather than go down the interstate. So where my challenge comes in is now when I take this map that has been made and I bring it into my phone and navigate with it, it doesn't navigate like a normal maps, Google Maps navigates.
Okay, so there are a couple of challenges that you run into making maps this way. So if I was to go in here and, like I said before, make a direction from my location to a place, it gives me the fastest route. So if I want to add in other areas, I go up here on the 3 dots and I say add a stop, and then I can go in and I can add other areas, move them where I want, and then it changes the way my route goes. So with this, you can only have a beginning and an end and 8 points in between there. So some of my legs had more than that, so I can't use this as my way of making my maps. So that is why I went in and did a my maps function. And so the way that you find that is if you go down here to the bottom where it says saved, and then you scroll all the way down, and over here to the right you have maps. This is the way to bring in your maps. So remember, I have my trip to Daytona Beach, and if I go to my legend, I have just day 1 in here. So let's close that. Oh, I don't want to close that. When I go to that and zoom into here, so here is that map of that first day. And if you want to actually navigate on this map, if I touch the first point there, if you notice down below here, it gives me directions. So I can get my directions from my first map to the first location. But if I'm cruising along the road and my next location see is something while I'm actually moving, it is difficult to actually, when you're on the bike, press that to get to the next location. So I wanted it to work
the regular way that mapping works in the Google Maps when you're doing multiple locations for mapping.
So if you've ever done mapping and done multiple points, you know how it goes to the first point and then it goes to the next point and continues on through your route. Well, if you have more than 10 locations total, it won't allow you to do that. So that is why I created the My Maps function, but I don't like the way it navigates just from one point to the next. So I can't get my total route. So that is what brought me to using Kalimoto to make that total route type map. So in the Kalimoto app, I'll bring up the Kalimoto app from beginning. When you go into it, down here at the bottom, there is an option for rides. Then there's ones that people have shared. Then you can also go to your rides, and under the your rides area, it will record your routes that you've gone. You can also create maps. So I went down here and created that map of day 1 to bike week, and in here I put in my points of the same points that I had in my other map, but I found it wouldn't follow the same route, so I had to add in extra waypoints so that it would take me on the route as I went. So one challenge thing that I found is, because of the way that this mapping app works, it wants to go and choose some curvy roads or some straight roads or really curvy roads, depending on what your route choice is. And here, if you see, it's trying to make me do a lot of curves and turns because it knows you like to do that in motorcycles. And this was a huge straight route down US 69 that wound up taking me longer. As you can see, it says 534 miles, 11 hours and 17 minutes. So I'm going to cancel out of that route, and I'm going to go to my actual route from Nebraska to Mountain Grove, and I'm going to go into that one. And if you see here, I had to take and start going on my route, and it then I would just bypass. When it was telling me to turn off and go off over this way, I would just bypass that and knew I was going to stay on this route. So that is one of the challenges that I have found with this Kalimoto app, is it has done that to me
multiple times in multiple locations in trying to go through town. So now let's get back to the ride. The end of the day, I was in southwest Missouri on some back roads going into Mountain Grove, and there's quite a little bit of twisties to it, especially for it being at the end of 10 hours of riding. And I'll give you my little end of lessons that I have here. But if you made it this far, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me. Hopefully you learned something from this as far as your planning of maps or planning of navigation using Google Maps and using other mapping apps. The biggest reason why I use Google Maps for my planning is it gives me my distances, so I can choose a distance from point A to point B that's approximately 150 miles apart, and then I can go from point B to point C, and I can check how long those distances are within the Google Mapping app. If you notice here on these roads that we're doing, some of them you go up over little hills and around the curves, and as you can see, there's not much space on the outside of your lane. And the lanes are narrower on these roads than some normal lanes. So some of Southwest Missouri is some really cool riding because of that. It's also a little challenging to do at the end of the day. So let me know in the comments below if you have had any challenges with your mapping, if this helped you, and let me know if you use something different, what mapping apps you use. I know there's thousands of them out there. I've had other people tell me of other ones. In the next video, I will tell you about the likes and dislikes and some of the functions that I found in using and making the Calimoto app functional. Also will tell you what I thought of using the Harley Davidson app, and we'll tell you the pluses and minuses of those apps. And so till next time, just want to say thank you for following along on this, and we got more to this journey coming up. So now I am going to cut off here and go to the lessons that I gave at the end of my day.
Hey, so I'm going to record this while I am here in the room. My thoughts from day one. I have 3 lessons that I learned from that day. First lesson being, take the roads you want to take. I enjoyed taking the back roads. I'm glad I took the back roads. When you have to take major roads due to where you're at or whatever, motor down, but then enjoy the back roads. Lesson 2 is warmth and layers designed for an hour and a half or less do not work once you get over 2 hours, because you get chilled to the bone. I got chilled to the bone at the beginning of the day yesterday because of my layers, and stayed chilled. You know, I warmed up a little bit, but I really stayed chilled all day, a little bit. And lesson 3, do not take the twisties at the end of your day's route. They're not as enjoyable as they should be. Those are my lessons from day 1 of my trip.